You've tried to quit porn before, but every single time you fall back into the same cycle, right? Well, what if I told you there's an exact blueprint to follow to break free for good with 0 relapses by month 6? In this video, I'm gonna walk you through the proven plan that guarantees you can say goodbye to porn and never look back. Let's jump in. So look, I've spent the last 6.5 years dedicating my life to helping men quit porn. Nothing gets me more excited than having this right here. I love a good whiteboard. I'm gonna give you frameworks. This is the thing that I'm the best at. This is where I'm the most effective. And it's why I've been able to help 1,000+ guys quit pornography over the last few years. I'm super excited to share this with you because with the whiteboard here, especially, I've never really done a video like this before. This gives me a chance to break down my system, the thing that my clients are learning, getting incredible results, and now you get it with a really thorough explanation because of this thing right here, this amazing whiteboard. I'm excited. All right, month 0 is called Foundations. So this is all about laying the groundwork. And like I already said, it doesn't actually have to be a month. This could be a couple days, maybe a couple weeks. But we got 3 things that we need to accomplish in this section before we can move on to building self-awareness, okay? The first thing is commitment. Now, this might not seem like much, but if you don't commit to a 6-month process, if you're like, yeah, I'm gonna test this out, I'll try it, if I get some results month 1, maybe I'll continue, you can just stop the video now. Because honestly, that kind of approach, it's really not gonna get you the results that you need, and it's not gonna get you the momentum you need early on. You have to be committed to this process. Now, when I say commitment, I don't just mean you have to want it or desire it. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you want to break free and you desire that freedom. What I'm talking about here is why? Why do you actually wanna quit? What's the real reason? And there's no right or wrong. And I really would discourage you from looking at what other people do. I would just ask you, why do you want to quit? What's actually motivating you? What's on the other side when we get to month 6? What's going to make this whole journey worthwhile? And there's a reason, okay? There's a proverb that says, commit your works to the Lord. This is out of the Bible. Commit your works to the Lord and your thoughts will be established. So if you've ever felt like kind of confused about your recovery journey or you don't feel like you have a lot of clarity, it's probably because you're not committed. You're not committed enough to what you're doing. When you're committed, then there's clarity. Then we follow the path, we ignore all the distractions, and we're able to really give our best energy and our best attention to whatever it is that we've committed to. So recovery is no exception. We have to be committed to this process. So I want to ask you, why? Why do you actually want to quit? What's on the other side of recovery? You know, for me, when I started out in recovery, it was actually about my future wife. I was like, man, I don't want to bring this into a marriage. I want to quit now. I want to be a clean man before I meet the next person that I end up marrying, whoever that might be. And that was a huge motivating factor. But the other thing is I didn't like who I was when I watched pornography. So I just knew that I could be a better version of myself, maybe the best version of myself without pornography. And that was really motivating for me when I thought about all my dreams in life and all my goals and all the people that I love and care about and want to show up for in their relationships. So what's your why? Why do you actually want to quit? Okay. Important question to answer. The second thing is progress tracking. This is very, very important. Peter Drucker, who's like kind of a management business expert guy, he says, if it's not measured, it can't be managed. And if you think about recovery, this is like, especially the 6-month process we're going on, this is really all about being able to manage what's going on, getting more control of your life. And if we don't measure what's going on, then really we're going to struggle quite a bit in this process. So what you need is some sort of spreadsheet or some sort of template that has a couple things, okay? What date was it? Did you slip? Yes or no? Doesn't matter how many times. Doesn't matter if it was a little one or a big one. Yes or no? Was the day clean? And then what were your triggers? Okay, there's 2 kinds of triggers. There's internal triggers and there's external. So internal is going to be stressed. I missed a letter there. Internal. External. Okay, internal is I'm stressed. I feel lonely. I feel disconnected. It's what's going on within. It's usually triggering emotions. Maybe it's like a trauma trigger or, it could just be, I got really angry. Somebody really upset me today, okay? That's an internal trigger. External triggers are the attractive girl at the gym, or it's not even necessarily sexual. It could just be My wife and I got into a fight. There was a situation that was triggering for me. We need to write down both of these, okay? Because our next step is building self-awareness, and these two things right here are actually some of the secret sauce. Okay, that's why we lay the foundation first. We're not just going to jump in without laying it, otherwise it creates problems. So make sure that you have some sort of progress tracker, date, slip, triggers. And with our clients, we actually have one column for internal, one column for external. We separate them out. Now remember, the goal here, we're not doing this to get a streak going. Okay, that's not what this is about. This is actually about managing and measuring our progress. Okay, we want to measure our progress as we move along, and that's going to be the key for us. And then number 3, okay, the third thing that we need to do to lay this foundation is to get the right people involved. So with people, the worst thing you could do is go through this process alone. And the reason I know that is because I did it. I did it alone for years in recovery. I struggled and I struggled, and I was just like, kind of like a hopeless person out to sea, trying to find my way back to shore. People were the key for me to actually find my way. And so the fact that you're watching this video is awesome. You should subscribe to this channel and make sure you get more great content to help you. I can be one person, but I would love for you to have somebody that you know a little bit more closely, more personally. So this could be a friend, this could be a mentor or a leader. There's lots of online communities. There's a community we've built, but there's lots of other ones out there as well. Having other people along for the journey is really important. Otherwise, you're going to feel very alone, and you're probably going to make a lot of unnecessary mistakes along the way. So these 3 things right here lay a foundation for us to get into month 1, which is building self-awareness. So the basic goal is we want to understand our inner life as well as we possibly can. The better we understand it, the better we can control it and really be in control of our behavior. So we label emotions, we define thoughts. One thing we give our clients that I'm not going to cover today is called the feelings wheel. You can just Google that and find it. It's a really good tool for guys in particular. If you're like me, I didn't grow up learning about emotions. I didn't have the language to really understand this. And we're not trying to create like super touchy-feely guys. This is not about you crying all the time. But the feel wheel can really give you some insights into what emotions you are feeling. And maybe you are, a little more sensitive and you find yourself getting more emotional, crying. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The point is, whatever emotions you're feeling, we need to be able to label them, and then defining thoughts. Guys are generally better at this. It helps to have some good questions asked of us and that kind of thing. So what I've designed here is the process matrix. Okay, so when you're labeling emotions and defining thoughts, everyone's going to be different on how they do this optimally. And so what I want you to think about is basically 2 variables. The method in which you process, verbal or written, and who's involved. Are you going to do this alone, or are you going to do this with others? Okay, so if you like to do this verbally and alone, I have really good news for you. You can label your emotions and define your thoughts very, very easily. So this is basically going to be you talking out loud. And that might sound funny if this doesn't do anything for you, but for people who do really like to process verbally, but they want to do it alone, you don't want to have people listening, you maybe have that fear of being judged or whatever it is, talking out loud is a really, really good way for you to label your emotions and define your thoughts, okay? If you are a verbal person and you enjoy kind of processing with others, these are, verbal processors, as it were. Then what you'd want here is you'd want a key friendship or some kind of environment that allows you to basically process verbally with another person. So, this is where an accountability partner could be really valuable. A lot of people reduce accountability partner to just like, hey, are you watching porn or are you not? But what if your accountability partner was actually helping you get ahead of things and holding you accountable for your emotions and your thoughts? That would actually be pretty cool. And so if you're a verbal processor, this is great. If you don't really like processing verbally, or you prefer to do it written and alone, the easiest way is going to be to journal. And most of the people that we serve are high performers. They're professionals, business owners, doctors, athletes, that kind of thing. I find a lot of them tend to like journaling. They like that it's private, and in written format just seems to work better for them. It's not true of all of them. I'm not typecasting, but we really have a strong emphasis on journaling in the Deep Clean program. And then if you prefer written with others, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. So you might actually really benefit from blogging or something like that. Or it could be journaling, but you're reading it. So you journal first alone, and then you kind of read it out to others, or you could get into a group environments. But however you do it, like whichever way makes the most sense to you that you prefer, that's the method that you want to use to label your emotions and define your thoughts. If you don't know where to start, you're like, I have no idea, start with journaling. Okay, this is the easiest one because it's private, it's individual, it's very cost effective, and it doesn't really require anybody else. So there's just more variables that are within your control. So I would start with journaling. This is the first skill that we need to build to get going on recovery. And once you have this, then we move on to step 2, which is nervous system regulation. Okay, month 2 is all about nervous system regulation. So, I was a university researcher for many, many years. I could geek out all day on nervous system regulation or, honestly, any aspect of it. I love it. I'm going to keep it really simple today, just so we get the basics to kind of keep things moving forward in our 6-month plan. The basic idea here is our nervous system is kind of like the internal circuitry for our entire body and for our brain. So when it comes to porn addiction, you have triggers, you have temptations, you have urges. There's things in life that go on that maybe are, well, that are definitely not sexual, that can affect our nervous system. And the idea of regulating your nervous system is getting everything to a stable and steady state when, for whatever reason, you've been dysregulated. Now, I am an idealist and a perfectionist, which can be a really dangerous combo. And so the idealist in me goes, I would love to teach you how to just be regulated permanently, never dysregulated, never disrupted. And that's just not really how things work. What we're gonna go after today, and really for the sake of your recovery, is 2 things, okay? We wanna understand what is the red zone for us specifically, and then what is the green zone for us specifically, or for you specifically. So here's what I mean, okay? The red zone is when you are dysregulated. So this is where you get triggered. And the scientific language is, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. These are kind of some more clinical elements. Fight or flight are the 2 big ones that everybody talks about. These 2 I think are pretty relevant also. What we need to identify though is we can't just say, okay, yeah, when I'm in my red zone, yeah, I go into fight or flight, or I freeze, or I fawn, or whatever. What we actually want to know specifically is, what does that look like? So I would actually encourage you to pull out this a paper. You can draw the same chart, have the 2 zones, have the symptoms, and then these are, again, kind of the general symptoms, but this is where you're going to actually form a plan. And that's the goal in month 2, is we want to form a proper plan that basically says, when I am dysregulated, when I'm in my red zone, I do X, Y, Z. My breathing increases, I clench my jaw, I clench my fists, I become very activity oriented, or maybe I shut down, I don't talk, I don't want to connect with anybody, I isolate. Again, everyone's got their own responses here, or I become a people pleaser. That's kind of what fawn is. So fawn is sort of like, I just do whatever you need to do to make this go away. There's no right or wrong, but the more individual this is, the better. When you are stressed, when you're dysregulated, when you're disconnected, when you're in those overwhelmed states, what does this look like for you? So for me, when Sathiya is in his red zone, I can tell you a couple things. So number 1 is I become very activity driven. So I just get into let's get things done. The second thing I do is I tend to shut down emotionally. So I don't really want to talk. I'm just kind of isolated. And another thing that I definitely notice is my breathing is faster, and it's more shallow. Now, this is going to be true for most people. So the question is not, do you do this, but are you aware of it? Because if you're not aware of it, it may not really be that helpful for you to make a note of it. But do you notice that about yourself? And if I'm really, really dysregulated, I get chest tightness. So the reason this is helpful is because if we can identify, like, well, let me backtrack. I bet you if I were to look at the last 20 slips or 20 relapses you've had, you were probably in the red zone when all of them took place. So the reason this is so powerful is because, again, if we know what our indicators are, hey, I'm in the red zone, and then we have a green zone plan to get us out of here, then we can significantly reduce our relapse rate. If we just say, oh yeah, this is, I get in fight or flight and I just kind of tough it out, well, now you're really stacking the odds against yourself, and we want to stack the odds in your favor as much as possible. So I'd love for you to fill this out while we're going through this. What are the things that you do when you're in your red zone? And again, it doesn't have to just be when you're triggered sexually to watch pornography. It could just be when you're really overwhelmed, you're really stressed, you're really disconnected. Okay, so that's the red zone. The green zone is a beautiful place. The green zone is what we call rest and digest. So this is where you're calm, you're still, you're present in the moment, and you're very in your body. This is kind of when we're at our best. And the chances of you having a relapse in your green zone are next to nothing. What does it look like for you to be in your green zone? And more specifically, and what we're actually going to write here is not what does it look like for you to be in your green zone, but what is required for you to get into your green zone. Okay. Now, again, you might need to experiment and find out because maybe you don't know. But let me ask you a question that might really help with this. Can you think of a time that you were really stressed out about something and you successfully got yourself calm again? Just think of one time. What did you do that time? What did you do to make that happen? So for me, I can tell you there's a couple things I do. So number one is some deep breathing that really goes on. Deep breaths. Deep breathing really, I mean, again, this is a really good way for you to regulate, to calm down, and to stabilize. So deep breaths is a big one. Another thing for me, this is going to sound a little bit funny, but controlled movement. Okay, what do I mean by that? So I heard one time that going for a walk is a great way to regulate. So when I would get stressed out or triggered, I would go for a walk. And what I realized after a while is, man, I'm power walking. Like I'm walking so fast and I'm basically just furthering my dysregulation because it's so activity oriented and I'm not actually calming myself down. So controlled movement could be stretching. It could be going for a walk, but really making sure I'm walking slowly, I'm pacing myself, I'm controlling my breath while I do it. Very, very helpful. So controlled movement is really, really good for me. Another thing I do in my green zone is I listen to calming music. Okay, and if this is true for you, what you actually want to do is you want to create, I would call it my green zone playlist. So that anytime you catch yourself doing whatever it is your red zone items are, that you have that playlist queued up, you can pull it up, and bam, you can get yourself back into a regulated green zone state. And you can kind of start to see how if we can get out of our red zone as quickly as possible back into the green zone, then we're really not going to be in those positions where we feel that urge that's almost uncontrollable to act out and to watch pornography. So I want to ask you, what do you need to do to get yourself back into the green zone again? That's how you're going to form your green zone plan. This list could be much longer. Some of our clients, they have, 10, 15, 20 things, and there are different things that they can do in different scenarios, or depending on how much time they have, or are they at home or are they at work. I mean, you can get very specific on your green zone plans. You would orient, if you do want to get more specific, you would orient it around where you tend to have relapses the most. You don't need to have like 25 different green zone plans. That's kind of useless. But I would say before you get into those specific plans, and before you even get into a list of 10 to 15, just have 3. Like, what are your 3 go-tos that are pretty much guaranteed to help you regulate? That is your green zone plan, and that completes month 2. So now that we've built self-awareness and we have a green zone plan to keep our nervous systems regulated, now we can start digging into the heart a little bit. Okay, month 3 is all about heart discovery. So the idea is we're trying to unearth the things that are within you that are at a more root or causal level for your porn addiction. And usually there's three main roots that we're looking for. We're looking for emotional immaturity, which we already kind of tackled in month 1 and month 2. We're also looking for trauma, and that requires a little bit more of a specialized focus. I'm probably going to do another video on it at some point. But today I'm going to focus on the third big root that tends to kind of surface when we get into month 3, and that is faulty belief systems. Now, the exercise we're going to use to kind of get to the core of our faulty beliefs are trigger diggers. And you might be wondering, like, how does a faulty belief, what does that have anything to do with me watching porn? I just watch porn because, I get an urge and it's just a sexual thing and whatever. No, actually not true at all. Watching porn is the symptom, right? It's the final manifestation, but there's things that happen at a much more internal level, almost in like a cascade, like a sequence of events that happen internally that lead you to watching. And we're literally going to break this down. You're going to be blown away by the time we finish this exercise. Okay, trigger digger exercise. Now, this is why I told you in month 0, you need to be writing down your triggers, okay? Because whatever triggers you have, we're going to use for this exercise. You go one at a time, but you can actually go through all of them. And that's when it's the most effective. But let me not get too far ahead of myself. What you're going to do is you're going to start with the trigger. Okay, so the one I have here is stressed at work. Sorry, my writing got a little doctory there. Stressed at work. Very, very common one. Like I said, I work with a lot of high performers, and I, also identify as a high performer myself. And I've been clean for, over 9 years now. But really, like, stress was a huge part of my pornography addiction. So you can write this down again on your piece of paper. Stressed at work or whatever your trigger is. You saw an attractive person at the gym, you were bored, you were lonely, you got into a fight with someone. It doesn't really matter, but write it in. And then we are going to ask a critical question. That question right there is unbelievably powerful. Why? Why were you stressed at work? Why? Now, it might seem really obvious, like, duh, like, do I really need to write this out? Yes, you really need to write this out. Trust me, we're going somewhere with this. Okay? I'm stressed at work. Why? Because I had deadlines to meet. Why was that stressful for you? We're literally just going to keep asking this question a couple different ways. So I'm stressed at work. Why? Because I had deadlines to meet. Why? Because I feel good about myself. Now, one thing I didn't say at the beginning here, and let me say this now before we go any steps further. If you have an internal trigger, it's going to be more effective for this exercise. So, like, seeing the attractive girl at the gym, that's an external trigger. Again, we can make use of it and it will still be very helpful, but the fastest path to the roots is going to be through an internal trigger. So sorry for not mentioning that earlier, but we're not too far down. You can reset if you have an internal trigger that you need to use instead. So I'm stressed at work. Why? Because I have deadlines to meet. Why is that stressful? Because I feel good about myself when I meet deadlines. Okay, why? So it's just a little question. Just a 3-letter question that is unbelievably powerful. Why? Why do I feel good about myself when I meet deadlines? Okay, so now you can kind of see, like, we've asked this question 3 times, and after we get to this 3rd or 4th time, usually we start to get a little bit more underneath the surface. I feel good about myself. Why do I feel good about myself? There's no right or wrong here. And you're all going to have different answers depending on who you are and what your thing is. But you can start to see how now we're kind of getting into more like core belief territory. I wouldn't say we're quite there yet, but we're getting pretty close. My value comes from my performance. Why does my value come from my performance? Okay, I'm going to start on a new line here. Ran out of real estate. So why does my value come from my performance? We started with something very simple. We've all experienced stress at work. So why were you stressed at work? Because I had deadlines to meet. Why was that stressful for you? Because I feel good about myself when I meet deadlines. Why? Because my value comes from my performance. Why? Because I don't actually feel good enough. So I need to perform to feel like I'm actually good enough, to feel like I actually have value and I have worth. Okay? Why don't you feel good enough? Now you can see, all we did was just dig a little bit with our power question. And by asking why, in this case 5 times, we now got to a core belief. And again, I know you probably still don't believe me. And in fact, I've taught this at seminars before and people come up to me afterwards and they're like, Dude, I don't get it. Like, I don't get how this has anything to do with pornography. Let's go backwards, okay? So let's say, for whatever reason, you have this fundamental belief that you are unlovable, okay? You don't think that you're actually worthy of love. If people saw you for who you really were, they wouldn't love you. Now, if you believe that you weren't lovable, do you think it's possible that you would feel like you're not good enough? Yeah, probably, right? And do you think that if you didn't feel good enough that you would work hard or try to perform and achieve so that you could feel good about yourself? Because then you get people's applause and you get affirmation from others? Yeah. And if you felt good about yourself, do you think that would drive you to meet your deadlines at work? And do you think that if you were having a hard time meeting your deadlines that it would cause stress? And do you think that if you lived stressed out long enough that you'd be more likely to relapse, to take the edge off? Once we go backwards, all of a sudden we can kind of see how something that seems so unrelated is actually very related to our porn addiction. And this part of hard discovery is very, very powerful for discovering those core beliefs, because if we know what the core beliefs are, we can start to heal through them. And that's what I'm going to show you in month number 4. Let's get to it. So I really want to encourage you, before we move on, do a trigger digger exercise. Take an internal trigger if you got one. No problem using an external trigger. Ask yourself why. You're going to need to do this a minimum of 5 times. If you got there faster, I'm going to say you probably did it because you did it out of routine or that kind of thing. I would really it's okay to flesh this out a little bit. But usually 5 to 7 times is enough. And once you've done it about 5 to 7 times, I'll even make a note here just in case you want to take a screenshot or something like that. 5 to 7 times. And once you've done this 5 to 7 times, you should get pretty close to a core belief. Now, if you really want to do this exercise properly, after a couple months of accumulating different triggers and whatnot in your progress tracker, you could then do this. I would be doing this probably 7 or 8 times with different triggers and figure out which of these core beliefs come up again and again. Because we could pick a completely different trigger, like instead of stressed at work, it's I got into a fight with my wife. We could ask why 5 to 7 times, and more times than not, you're going to end up with the same core belief. And if it starts to show up repeatedly, that's when we really know this is a core belief. Just doing it one time, it's there. It's there for sure. But we don't know how significantly it's there until we break down a couple more triggers. So that'd be my encouragement. 5 to 7 times, you're going to ask why. If you can do this for, 7, 8 triggers, you're going to start to identify some really core beliefs. And from there, and from these core beliefs, then we can really start to get a clear picture of what we want to focus on when we get to month 4, which is heart discovery. Let's jump in. Okay, month 4 is heart healing. So here's the deal. We have laid a foundation, we've built self-awareness, we've learned how to regulate our nervous system, and we've also identified some core beliefs through our trigger digger exercise in month 3. Month 4, what we're going to focus on is heart healing. Now, I referenced trauma earlier as one of the kind of core root issues that people have to deal with. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit here in month 4 and give you some thoughts on what this process might look like. So month 1 and 2, we're really focused on the emotional immaturity part and growing emotionally so we can enlarge our capacity. This is going to really set us up for good decision making. But it's not enough. If we have core beliefs or faulty beliefs that are at the root of our behavior, we need to give attention to those, address them, heal them, and resolve them. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about that in month 5. Month 4 tackles the other third issue that often comes up at a root level, which is trauma, or I'll just put unresolved parts of the past. Now, I really struggled with the word trauma because I had a good upbringing. I didn't have anything major happen until I was about 14. I lost a friend to suicide. But again, that wasn't like household trauma. Like, dad never raised his voice at me, and my parents didn't really fight in front of us. And you know what I mean? Like, I had a pretty easy childhood. So I thought, I don't have trauma. That's not me. But really, trauma is anything from your past that affects your present negatively. So I want you to really think about that. Trauma is anything from your past that negatively impacts your present. What we want to do to really understand this kind of heart healing thing is we want to connect the past with our present. And we're going to do this through 3 different ways, okay? First thing we're going to do is pay attention to first sexual experiences. So It's interesting for me. Like I remember having like these fantasies about other girls that were in our community as young as the age of like 4 or 5. And they weren't overtly sexual because I didn't really know much at 4 or 5, but they were still there. And I would call those first sexual experiences. Now, these can be very indicative of how we have programmed our brain to use sexuality and sexualization of other people to satisfy our needs, to address pain in our lives, whatever it might be. First sexual experiences can be very indicative. Obviously, if you had abuse as a young child, which unfortunately is becoming more prevalent, that's a great example of something in your past that is probably shaping your present behavior in ways you don't even realize. Upbringing dynamics is another one. So these would just be parents' dynamics. And again, it doesn't have to be that your dad beat you. It doesn't have to be that your mom verbally abused you. It doesn't have to be that your parents went through a divorce, although it could be those things. The point is there are dynamics that contributed to your upbringing, and some of them might have left you in a place where you were more prone to acting out sexually. And a big one, a big example of this would be unmet needs. So let me share a personal example. And I discovered this much later on in my recovery journey. I wish I learned what I'm about to teach you. But basically, my first sexual experiences really didn't reveal a ton for me. Okay, just wasn't the case. For some people, they're very indicative. For some, not so much. My upbringing, like I said, I had a good childhood. I didn't have a lot of trauma. That was sort of the guise that I had always masked my life with. But with a specialist, somebody was asking me really good questions, and they started to ask about my relationship with my mom. And as we got deeper, it turns out that even though my mom is this amazing woman, a great caregiver, and a provider for me, she actually kind of was not the most emotionally present person. She didn't always know how to express herself and show affection. And so I grew up with this sense of neglect. All right, so for me, this looked like neglect. And because I felt neglected by my mom and I didn't feel that emotional connection and I didn't receive that affection the way I needed it, I had this unmet need that resulted in chasing girls and porn. And look, guys chase girls. Like, you know what I mean? Like when I was a teenager, like obviously guys are interested in girls. That's not an indicator that you have trauma. But two different people can do the same thing, and one does it out of just a normal, natural place, and the other does it out of a place of trauma. So for me, I just discovered, and again, chasing girls not the best example. Watching pornography compulsively, scheduling my days around watching porn, that's a pretty good example of, man, there were some unmet needs as a child in my upbringing dynamics that led to me acting out and watching pornography. So in month 4 with heart healing, what we're really interested in is connecting the past with the present. And these are the 3 things I would encourage you to focus on to start to connect some dots. And I would say at this point in the journey, this is where you're gonna need some guidance. Okay, so you at the very least need some material like a video or something like that. But really, I highly recommend working with a specialist. We have coaches on our team as an example, but therapists, there's licensed counselors, there's all kinds of people that can help you really connect these dots and do it effectively. However, one caveat to that, you want to find somebody that specifically works with this or does this in the area of pornography addiction. If they don't have that expertise, they're gonna lead you to some helpful discoveries, probably not specific enough to help you quit porn. So very important. And that's where this whole resolving thing comes into play. And there's a couple things that this will look like. So I'm obviously already talking about like getting professional help and guidance, but let's go a step further than that. Let's assume you get a professional involved, and I'll just make a note of here. So number 1 is forgiveness. Very important. I'm always shocked at how few people do not talk about forgiveness. But it's a big deal. Forgiveness goes a really long way. In my coaching practice, all of my coaches have at least 3 certifications and a couple modalities and just methods that I'm really passionate about, that I've seen the most success. And one of them is inner child work. So I don't know why, but it seems like with compulsive sexual behavior, inner child work is just unbelievably effective. So if you can find somebody who specializes in this, can walk you through it, can help you, again, this really goes a long way. And then the last one, this is more of a spiritual one, but even if you're not faith-based, I still think this is very important. And we've had lots of clients who are not a particular religion or a different one than me, but this is still really effective. They get great results by breaking soul ties. And so I would say these three really go a long way once you start to kind of identify and pinpoint what's going on here at this level. So this is a little bit more complex. Obviously, as you can see, this is not like a simple system you can just follow for this particular step. But there is content online, especially going through inner child work. I would say if you do nothing else, just look for some content here on inner child work. That's going to go a long way. I'm going to develop some content on this in the future as well to help you out. But one person that I really like is Drew Boa of Husband Material. He's been a really good proponent of this message. He's got a good framework. So that would be a recommendation there if you want to go check it out and look it up. But that's what month 4 is all about, getting your heart healed up. And man, I'm telling you, once you hit this point here, okay, this is when people start to look at you and they're like, man, something's different about you. Like, I can't figure out what it is. Like, this is where it's clear that you're not just stopping a behavior, you're actually starting to change as a person. And I mean, we have clients show up to our calls when they're starting to go through this stuff, and like, you barely recognize them. They're smiley, the stress is out of their face, you know, they're a lot more relaxed, their eyes are open, they're more present. And that obviously starts to spill over into their relationships and their career and everything else. But it's usually the byproduct of them not acting out. They're not watching porn anymore, because this area right here allows you to gain so much control over your life. And I will tell you, most of my recovery journey personally was like incremental. You know, I just got better one day at a time, and then I would look back 6 months, or I'd look back a year and say, wow, like, I've made a lot of progress. When I identified this dynamic with my mom and why I was acting out, which, you know, I felt this sense of neglect. And in that session, the person asked me, hey, do you want to forgive your mom? Do you want to walk through this process? And I said, yes, I do. I really, really do. And in the process of forgiveness and forgiving her, I mean, I'm telling you, I walked out of the office different. I felt tempted the next day, and instead of the temptation being a usual 7 or 8 out of 10, it was like a 2. Like, something radically shifted in me, and something will radically shift in you when you go through this system and this part of the process seriously. So again, don't gloss over this, and you can comment. Let me know in the comments if you want some more resources, or you want a referral or guidance, or whatever, or you can always message me on Instagram as well. My DMs are always open there. But again, I would say take this stuff seriously. It's going to go a long way. What we want to do, so once we've kind of reached this point in the journey, this is where I would say, you know, if there was like a hockey stick curve in recovery, so far we're kind of like baseline. You're going to see some results, don't get me wrong. What I'm going to show you over these next 2 months is what's going to actually cause your hockey stick, and this is where your life is going to change dramatically. It's going to get really exciting. So let's get into month 5. Okay, month 5 is all about shifting your identity, and this is really where the Deep Clean method is very different from a lot of other addiction recovery models. It's all because of this one statement right here. Okay, I want you to read that one. Remember this one, write it down, internalize it, memorize it, do what you need to do. Watch this. You cannot outbehave your beliefs. I'm of the fundamental conviction that you cannot outbehave your beliefs. So earlier in month 3, when we did the trigger digger exercise, my core belief that came up, it was right over here somewhere on the whiteboard, was I am unlovable. Now, as long as I believe that I am unlovable, I can pray all I want, I can muster up all the willpower, I can white knuckle my way, I can do whatever I want. As long as I believe I am unlovable, I'm probably going to act out one way or the other. Maybe I can quit pornography, but that bad belief, that faulty belief, will manifest itself in another way. So what happens when we try to white knuckle it and we try to do willpower is we end up trying to outbehave the belief. And that's kind of like running over a weed with the lawnmower. It's not going to work. The root system is still there. So, you know, a lot of addiction models say once an addict, always an addict. Well, I don't believe that. I believe that you had an addiction and you were an addict, but if you go through a transformational roots-based recovery process, I actually believe that you can change. I actually believe that you can leave that old identity behind and embrace a new one. So what does that actually look like? It looks like ditching performance, ditching the past, ditching the opinions of others, ditching the cultural elements that maybe are keeping us boxed in, and even religion. Now, I'm not saying ditch your culture. I'm not saying ditch your religion. I'm saying ditch the parts of it that are negatively contributing to your identity. So I'm going to, again, just put myself on the altar here because I've been using myself as an example. We're going to ditch performance. Performance means that my value as a person or my identity is based on what I do. Okay, we do not want to live this way because if we live this way, then we will feel great about ourselves when we're performing well and maybe we're less likely to act out. And when we fail, when we fall short, when we feel like we're not meeting expectations, we're going to be actually way more likely to watch pornography. We don't want to live with that instability or that constant pressure to perform. We have to ditch that. Ditch your past. Okay, that's kind of what we talked about in month 4. But look, I don't care what you've done. I don't care if you slept with 1,000 prostitutes. I don't care if you had 7 affairs. I don't care if this is your 9th marriage. Whatever your past is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Your beliefs are going to shape who you are, who you become, and how you behave. That's what I'm interested in. So it doesn't matter what your past is. We got to ditch that. The opinions of others. Maybe people have called you certain names. Maybe people told you you never amount to anything. Maybe somebody who's been hurt by your addiction told you, you're just a hopeless failure. You're always going to struggle with this, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what they've said. You get to choose whether or not you believe it. Culture, okay? Indian culture. Indian culture has this thing of like, you're only valuable as an Indian if you're good at maths, you're good at sciences, and you're a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer. So for me, I had to escape that. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a coach, I'm kind of more in the psychology realm. It's just not celebrated in Indian culture the same way. And I had to understand like my identity does not come from meeting these cultural standards and values and norms. And then religion. Religion's another one. Now, I really believe more in a relationship with God than religion, which is why I am comfortable putting this on the list. But I'm not saying you need to abandon your faith. Like if you grew up with faith and it's caused you to, have this struggle with sexual sin or whatever. I'm not saying ditch your religion. What I am saying is there might be things in your thinking about who God is and about what religion looks like that are contributing to a really faulty identity, a set of bad belief systems that are going to lead to bad behaviors. Instead, I want you to embrace an identity that has 3 things, okay? The first thing is good identity, healthy, stable identity is relational in nature, okay? It has more to do with your relationship to other people than anything else. Because at the end of the day, this is a lot harder to move. It's a lot more sturdy. Okay, I have a son and I have another baby on the way. And the reality is my son will always be my son. And that identity he carries as my son, that is immovable. Now, I'm not saying his entire identity should be built on that. There's 3 elements we're going to go through. But the important thing here is an identity based on relationship has a lot more stability. The second thing we're looking for with a healthy belief system or healthy identity is the truth. In other words, my faulty belief, my faulty core belief from the work in month 3, the trigger digger exercise, was I am unlovable. It's not actually true. And if I find my identity in my relationships instead, my relationship with God, my relationship within my family, if that's where my identity is, then I can start to embrace the truth of who I am, which is that I am lovable. I am lovable. That's actually fundamentally true. And I know it's true because of my relationships. Now, again, there might not be that interplay quite in that way. That's very specific to my core belief. But the point is, good identity is founded on relationship, the truth, and lastly, very, very important, context. Okay? I really do believe that there's kind of like lowercase I and capital I. So lowercase I is, like I said, I'm a father to my son, I'm a husband to my wife, I'm a son to my parents. The truth is that I'm lovable, but the context really matters because in a family context, my identity is I'm a Sam, that's my last name. In a professional context, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a coach. In a more faith-based context, I believe that I'm a son of God. It's going to look different depending on the context. There's nothing wrong with multiple identities. I would say my faith-based identity as a son of God, that's my capital I identity. That's the one that transcends all avenues and arenas of life. But knowing the context can be really helpful for you to know what's true. What's true about the situation. And usually it's the relationship context. These have an interplay. When you have healthy beliefs, okay, so again, if we were to go back to month 3 and we reversed that I am unlovable and we made it I am lovable, the cascade starts to move differently. So you can see how when we actually implant the truth within our hearts, our cascade of thinking looks very different. And this is why we're talking about shifting your identity, right? We're shifting it from where it was before. You believe that you weren't lovable, and because you weren't lovable, it led to this cascade that eventually causes you to act out. And now we're shifting it to the truth, right? The truth. And this might have, like I said, a relational piece. We're going to think about maybe the context of it. But I am lovable, and this leads to a much better outcome in a situation that ordinarily would cause me to act out. And that's why this is getting to the root. You can see how we're really getting to the actual causal elements of your porn addiction. And the more that you walk in truth, the better your decision making will be. Not just to avoid pornography, that's like step 1. That's like getting out of debt. I'm talking about step 2 to step 100, which is like building a successful life, building a life you're proud of, becoming somebody who makes a difference in this world, which is really what it's all about. That's why we want to believe the truth. Now, this system I've laid out from month 0 to month 5, like I said, you could stop here and you'd be good. You would see unbelievable progress. And I would guess that your relapse rate at this point is probably going to be around 0. That would be my guess. But we have to go to month 6, because if we don't do month 6 and if we don't refine the process a little bit more, specifically for you and where you're at, this is going to be a big surge of momentum, and then we're going to lose all of it. And we don't want to lose our progress. We don't want to lose our momentum. So let's jump into month 6 and let's wrap this thing up. Okay, if you made it this far in the video, congratulations, well done. We are on month 6, the most important month. I'm telling you, even if you did the first 5 months, like okay, like a 6 out of 10, an 8 out of 10, you know there's some things you could have improved. If you do month 6, you can literally cover up all of those shortcomings or the areas where you're like, yeah, I think I got this, but I'm not sure, with 2 key questions, okay? And I can't tell you how many times I've been in a session with a client and they're stuck. You know, they've plateaued or they've hit a wall, they can't figure out what their next step is. I literally just ask these 2 key questions and they get all the breakthrough that they need, okay? 2 key questions. You're going to ask these questions as well. And to be honest, you could actually ask these questions after month 0, 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. You could do it after every month if you want to. This is such a good way to keep yourself moving forward and to ensure that you're actually spending your time and energy on the right things, okay? Here are the 2 questions. So at this point in the process, like you've done a bunch of stuff, right? We built self-awareness and we talked about journaling and some of that stuff. We've done some trigger digger exercises. We built out your progress tracker. So you're tracking your triggers, then you're working through them. You're digging them up. You're figuring out what's going on at the core level. We did some heart discovery. So we talked about healing of the heart and inner child work. And there's lots of different processes that we're going through. But at this point in the journey, some of those are going to be really effective still, and some of them not as much. So what is working? Okay, and there's a specific activity or there's a specific action that we want to follow the things that are working. I'm going to share that in a minute. Question number 2, guess what it is? Okay, question number 2 is probably obvious. What is working? What's not working? For the things that are working, okay, let's say journaling is just opening up your eyes to a whole bunch of stuff you had no idea about, and you are getting so much value. So what we want to do, if it's working, is we want to do more. Plain and simple. Do more. Look, if the journaling thing's working, do more of it. If you did some inner child work and you got a bunch of breakthroughs, go do some more of it. And I'm not saying do more of it forever. I'm just saying let's do more of it right now. Let's put our foot on the gas while it's working and let's get the most out of it while we're in that spot where it's effective. It's one of my biggest regrets in recovery. You know, I was trying to do all of the things and have this really well-balanced approach instead of just realizing, dude, this one thing is working so well for me. How do I just do more and more and more and more of it? And I'll keep doing more of it until eventually the effect starts to wear off and it's diminishing returns, and then I'll move on. And it's not that I ditch all the other things. It's just that I keep the things that are working my number 1 priority, because that's what's going to get me the best results. Number 2, what's not working? Can you guess what our activity is for this, or our action? We're going to do less. Let's say that, the trigger digger exercise, it worked. It was okay for a little bit. And then you kind of realize, yeah, I think I got everything I need out of that. It's not really giving me anything new or insightful. do less of it. You probably don't need to do that exercise anymore. Or maybe more accurately, you don't need to do it right now. So we always want to be focused on the things that are working right now. And that is really the absolute key of all this. Like if there's one thing that kind of puts all of this in perspective, it's now. This is the key word. What is working right now? We want to do more of the things that are working, and what's not working right now, we want to do less of them. Again, if you're just watching this video to learn the process, well, yeah, you don't need to do this right now. You need to come back to this a little bit later. If you've been in recovery for a while, or you're doing this specific system, I would encourage you, ask this right now. Like, are there things you're spending your time on because somebody told you to do them, or you were convinced this was going to be the thing, but it's actually not working anymore? Dude, do less of it. Okay, don't worry about it, especially if there's things that are actually working, that are moving the needle forward. And I'm telling you, the number one reason that recoveries take longer than they need to is because people do less of what's working and they do more of the things that aren't working. And they end up just wasting all their time and energy. This is the 6-month process to get to 0 relapses. And I have seen, like I said, I've worked with 1,000+ clients. I have seen this system work again and again and again. If you want some help with this, okay, you have maybe a specific question, let me know in the comments below. I would love to help you out. And if you want a more private way to reach out to me, you can DM me on Instagram. I reply to all of my messages there. I would love to be able to serve you and make sure that you have a lasting recovery like I did. I'm telling you, quitting porn was the best thing that ever happened to me. Okay, now that you have the blueprint to recover, let me show you my story of how I quit porn forever, just to inspire you and show you how effective this thing can really be. My story is not just a tale, it's not something fabricated. Click here to watch how I got exposed to pornography, how I overcame it, and how you can overcome it too.